Tom Perez is the head of the DNC, and despite multiple times making clear that he doesn't think that he or other DNC officials should be getting involved in internal party primaries, he coincidentally found himself this week on the stage of the New York State Democratic Convention endorsing Andrew Cuomo in his gubernatorial primary. He said this: "I've not only admired him, I have admired the Cuomo family since my youth. I've admired what they stood for and for what they fought for since I was a kid, primarily, which was their own political advancement." Perez called Cuomo and his lieutenant governor running mate Kathy Hochul charter members of the accomplishment wing of the Democratic Party, seeming to echo a knock that Cuomo himself has made against this reference to Cynthia Nixon, his primary opponent, and New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, and quote, "That's why I'm proud to endorse them." Now his, I guess to some extent second in command, sort of, Keith Ellison was reached for comment on this and said, "The Democratic Party should not intervene in the primary process. It is our role to be fair to all contestants and let the voters decide." That's what Ellison said after what happened this week. Perez before said, "One thing we've learned at the DNC is that when you, in fact or in perception, are trying to put the thumb on the scale in a spirited primary, that can undermine public confidence in us. Oops. Now hold my beer as I put my thumb on the scale." Yeah.
So no, it's different. They're close friends. He's close.
Yeah, our close friends.
Yeah, come on, you guys.
But Namiki Konst, who's one of our reporters, made a great point about it. Doesn't that make it worse?
Right.
Yes.
Right. They're saying like,
good old boys.
well, I did corruption, but it's because I really like the guy and I'm biased in his favor. Okay, how did that make it better? Right? I gave a really crooked deal to this guy, but it's just because we're friends.
Well, and he's a part of the accomplishment wing.
Yeah.
So accomplishment wing, I want to come back to in a second because I got a lot of thoughts about that. First, about Keith Ellison. It was never real. Tom Perez was always an establishment candidate pick. They forced him in there. Ellison was going to win, and Obama panicked and said, "Ellison's a progressive, I can't have it," because Obama doesn't like progressives. So he's like, Tom Perez, he's our guy. He's the guy who will do exactly as he's told when he's told, right? And one of the powerful figures in the Democratic Party is Andrew Cuomo. He doesn't get talked about a lot in the national press because he's a governor. It doesn't affect a lot of the national issues. But along with Hillary Clinton and Obama and Nancy Pelosi, he is one of the most powerful members of the Democratic Party. So when he's in a race, and now all of a sudden it is a race because Cynthia Nixon's really giving him a run, and he's in a little bit of a panic, he's like, yeah, Tom, remember why we put you in there. So all this talk about neutrality, that was cute. For example, when Stacey Abrams was running in the Georgia gubernatorial race, well, that's governor race, just like the New York one. Stacey Abrams backed by an enormous number of progressive groups and Democratic groups too, right? Not just progressives. And everybody said, well, okay, are you gonna go on the side of Stacey Abrams? No, and that was just last week. No, earlier this week, right? They're like, no, neutrality. And then as soon as that race is over, they're like, yeah, just kidding. We hate progressives. That's why we didn't support her. Andrew Cuomo, the most establishment guy in the entire country right now. Yes, we jump in it. That's why Perez was picked. So Ellison, number 2 in command. What does that mean? Now that this happened, you see that it was always a farce. It doesn't mean anything. It's window dressing. In fact, it's counterproductive because it neutralizes Ellison's strong voice, which was the whole point of giving him the nonsensical, completely impotent number 2 position. I'm sorry, I like Keith Ellison, but that position has 0 power.
I disagree to some extent. I agree that it has effectively 0 power, but I think the perception that it comes with power has given him a bit more of a platform where he is naturally reached for comment on these sorts of things. He is in the media a lot that he might have otherwise. He might have gotten it anyway, but not necessarily. And so to some extent, he's at least able to give across his perspective.
So John, I hear you. So the establishment press hates progressives. So if he's considered part of the establishment, oh, you are number 2 at the DNC. Well, we do stories from the DNC. We have sources in there, and we run stories, whatever they tell us to run, just like we do with the RNC. So Keith Ellison, now you are a legitimate person, and I will listen to you. Yeah. The problem is, until now, he was forced to agree with Tom Perez, or wanted to agree with him, whatever, right? So there was actually no difference between them. So it was doubling down on the establishment position. So hence useless.
Yeah, he's corralling legitimacy for the Democratic Party, just like Ralph Nader said about Bernie Sanders. But what's funny is that when Perez won, right, everyone was up in arms about Ellison not winning, and Perez wins, and he says, that's what's great about the Democratic Party. He's like, we have this big tent approach. What they meant was actually they wanted to corral Republicans and Trump voters, not leftists. And you're totally right. I mean, this is precisely why he was picked. He's doing exactly what he is meant to do.
And this is an important race to do it in because Cuomo is running against a very popular celebrity. He's running against Miranda from Sex and the City in New York. So, I mean, a lot of us pay attention to politics. Anyone watching this show and on this panel, we pay attention. A lot of other people are voting for Miranda. So it's like if you're gonna have someone push the thumb, if you're gonna do that for a race, this is a big one. Because she's also gonna go into Congress and we're gonna watch her.
Yeah, and by the way, they're obviously, they're biased, they want him to win. Can you imagine if he ever thought, and they ever thought about the chance that he might run for president, how conflicted they'd be?
Exactly right, John. They're gonna back him 1,000,000,000%, right? It's the only question is which establishment candidate they're gonna pick. So that leads me to this question, which I asked earlier on Twitter, and so far I haven't gotten any answers. Can anyone name, it's a literal question, can anyone name a primary candidate, the Democratic Party, any of the branches, DNC, DCCC, DSCC, where they were the more progressive candidate in the race? Where the DNC came in and said, no, we're supporting the progressive. No, in almost every instance, I can't think of any, no one online can think of any, reporters have at it. You guys are all really good friends with the Democratic Party. Why don't you call your sources, okay, and ask one of them. I literally cannot think of one progressive they have supported over a more conservative candidate.
We should call Michael, he might know.
Every single time, and if it's not every single time, with one maybe exception in the last 20 years, almost every single time, and I don't know what the one is, they back the more conservative candidate when they're theoretically the progressive party.
They're just making the same mistakes that they did in the 2016 election, and they will continue to make those mistakes over and over again. I mean, even though we knew that they would inevitably endorse Cuomo, they didn't have to come out and do this. It just basically just says a big F you to all the leftists and people who are progressives who want Cuomo to shift left, and they're just seeing the DNC just up to their old tricks.
And it's not like it wasn't clear.
Right.
It's not like, well, I wonder where Tom Perez is on this.
Exactly.
I hope I'm gonna read the tea leaves now and try to figure it out. And by the way, so we were talking about the election with Keith Ellison. Can you imagine right now if he was running it instead, where the party would be at, what their chances for November would be if he were leading their strategy, their campaign strategy, resources going to the candidates and all that?
Not having that just makes me sad.
Yeah, that's true.
They're a big tent, opening that tent.
Yeah.
So two more things about this. One, the good news, and there is good news in this, is that it will largely be counterproductive. Because which New York voter is going, oh, Tom Perez says I should vote for Andrew Cuomo. Okay, I'll jump right in. They have no idea who Tom Perez is. A lot of these establishment guys, since they are all in love with each other, they think ooh, Tom Perez is gonna make a big difference here. No, he's not. If he puts money in, that'll make a difference, but Cuomo already has over $30 million because he's the king of corruption. He literally ended a corruption panel looking into corruption about him. It started as looking into corruption on other people, and he was like, rock and roll. And then they're like, oh, it turns out you're really corrupt. He's like, I immediately end this panel, we're done with it. Okay, and there's a systemic corruption of the $30 million coming from corporate interests, et cetera, et cetera. He doesn't really need the money, but without the money, the DNC endorsement doesn't help at all, and I would argue is slightly counterproductive. In fact, the other day, he couldn't get Bernie Sanders' endorsement. He was furious. And it appears that he was one of the people who put Politico up to writing a hit piece on our revolution and Bernie Sanders because they didn't endorse him. And at the end of the Politico piece, it says, Andrew Cuomo did an appearance with Bernie Sanders and agreed with him on one thing and still didn't get the endorsement. Why is that in the story about Nina Turner and our revolution? It's obvious, oh, Andrew Cuomo made you run this story, okay? And so instead he goes and gets Hillary Clinton's endorsement.
Never learn.
Okay.
What about the accomplished wing thing?
Yeah, so now finally the accomplishment wing. Look, to be fair, so Cuomo has gotten some things done in New York that I am certainly in favor of and progressives are all in favor of. $15 minimum wage, legalizing gay marriage, and paid family leave. leave. But now think about the context. That's where the establishment press ends it. They're like, bravo, right? Why do we have to beg a Democratic governor in a deeply blue state for these positions? And when he finally concedes and gives us some of those positions after being in office for year after year after year, we're like, oh, fine, thank God, thank God. Okay, in one of the bluest states in America, we finally got gay marriage. Now we have gay marriage in red states. We're still giving Cuomo credit for that? And by the way that they did it was they bribed 4 Republicans and they threw giant fundraisers for them. So, and that was also steeped in corruption. In that case, I'm glad the corruption went in the right policy direction. But so, and with Cuomo, everything, you have to push and push and push. And he does all these games that he thinks are cute that no one notices. And in the old days, no one either A, noticed, because they're the establishment press and they're apparently terrible at their job, or B, they notice and they're like, well, we won't report it because then he won't give us he won't be a source and he won't give us scoops where I say positive things about him. But now there's the internet. You think we don't see how you did the so-called independent Democrats and then used that to make sure the Democratic priorities did not get passed because they joined the Republicans and then formed a majority and blocked all progressive legislation? And you want us to be thrilled at the crumbs you threw in our direction after all these years in office? And they do. They really think that, oh, the press is ours. And the oligarchs will rule, and the press will do whatever we tell them to do. Sad day for you, Andrew Cuomo and Tom Perez. Those are not the days anymore.
I don't know why Bernie didn't endorse him.
I mean, the fact that he did one appearance with Bernie and thought he was entitled to Bernie's endorsement.
You know what I do like out of that, though? He wants Bernie's endorsement.
Yeah, but only to trick people.
No, totally, I get that. But Bernie's endorsement is worth trying to get.
Yeah, and by the way, if you're wondering why, one, sure, he's the most popular politician in the country. It'd be nice to, get his supporters to be on your side. That's very, very relevant. The other thing is our revolution has 6 million emails. That is a giant email list that they could use to raise money. So when they look at our revolution, they don't see it as we see it, a grassroots movement meant to support local progressive candidates. They see it as a giant piggy bank. So the Andrew Cuomo's of the world look at it and go, give me the email so I can raise money off of it. You won't give me the emails. Hey, Politico. Hey, my boy at Politico, what do I pay you for? Get in there and write a smear job about our revolution. Bernie wouldn't give me his email list and wouldn't endorse me. And that's what they do. 2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below. Then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.